welcome back to my channel. As many of you may know, my name is Cliff, and I'm a retired United States Army Major. I served for 28 years in the uniform of our country, both in the enlisted as well as the commissioned officer ranks. I started my service as a Private E1 and held the ranks of Private First Class, Specialist in the E4 Mafia, Corporal, and Sergeant as a non-commissioned officer. Then I went on and attained a commission as a second lieutenant, serving as an officer in the United States Army Reserve. As an officer, I held every rank between second lieutenant and major, and served for over 7 years as a company commander. Of course, ultimately I retired in the rank of major. And my final assignment was serving as a battalion S3 operations officer. I served as a company commander for a little over 7 years. It was the things that I learned as a junior enlisted service member that helped me navigate my time as a company commander and leader successfully. The military consists of organizations, and it's very large. And as with any organization, you're going to run into both good leaders and bad leaders. And as I came up through the ranks, I paid close attention to the differences between the two. And I would suggest that a movie that does a great job of delineating the difference between good leaders and bad leaders is the epic movie Band of Brothers. This movie does an excellent job of portraying effectively the difference between the bad leadership of Easy Company Commander Herbert Sobel and his successor, Dick Winters, and the critical difference that the leadership approach of each of these men had on the morale and fighting effectiveness of that unit in World War II. Now, there are a long list of character attributes that we could go into, but one of the most common attributes of bad leaders is their willingness to abuse and mistreat their subordinates. Oftentimes, this abuse and mistreatment is for the sole purpose of their own personal promotion and advancement, and that is their overriding consideration. I learned early on as a young soldier to identify bad leadership and bad leaders. And I learned that contrary to what they might believe, even a company commander or senior leader is not beyond the reach of the enlisted soldiers they lead. What I mean is, many officers, particularly company commanders, come to the idea that they can abuse and mistreat their soldiers without consequence. That they can be abusive, arbitrary, and unprofessional and get away with it. They assume that the soldiers that they lead have no recourse or ability to repay the abuse. They are dead wrong. More often than not, bad leadership is a reflection on a combination of either deep character flaws, a lack of competency, or a combination of both. Either way, in a combat setting, it places people at risk, and the members of your unit know it. Now, the truth is, as a company commander, whether you like it or not, the lowest ranking member of your unit has the ability to impact your life and your career and return whatever abuse you've extended to them tenfold. And here's an example that I personally observed as a newly arrived armor crewman at my armor unit at Fort Benning, Georgia. So here's the story. So I arrived at the unit just a few weeks in advance of a rotation to the National Training Center, NTC, at Fort Irwin, California. We were an armor unit, so historically we would take our own tanks. We would rail load them on rail cars and ship them out, and then fly in and fall in on our tanks and our equipment. However, on this particular rotation, it was determined that instead of taking our own tanks, we would fly out and we would draw tanks there from the Armor Center. Now, each tank has probably $20,000 to $30,000 worth of tools and assorted equipment that has to be present for us to do crew level service maintenance in the field, because on any given day, you're going to have to do some kind of maintenance to keep that thing running. We had a company commander and a supply sergeant who, for better or worse, were jerks. They abused soldiers in our unit at every opportunity. It was gratuitous. Some of it had nothing to do with anything but being the biggest jerk you possibly could. And for whatever reason, our company commander found a kindred soul in this particular supply sergeant. They thought it was cute, but the fact is it was just bad leadership. This company commander went way out of his way to not take care of his soldiers and was abusive at every opportunity. I was still a new guy, so I was just getting acquainted with everybody, making my observations and learning. So when we got to Fort Irwin, California, we went and signed for our tanks. Separately, the supply sergeant and our company commander went and signed for all of the tool systems. And then those were laid out at a pre-designated location, and each of the platoons came in, conducted an inventory, and signed for their tools, tank by tank. And so the way it works is our company commander signs for all of the tools for the company, and then he issued a sub-hand receipt to our supply sergeant. Our supply sergeant then sub-hand receipted those tools to all of the tank crews, and the tank commanders signed the sub-hand receipt, kept a copy, supply sergeant kept a copy, and everything was accounted for pursuant to Army doctrine. Well, we went into the field and we conducted intensive training exercises for over 30 days. And during the course of those exercises, tanks in my platoon lost tools. It is usual and customary to lose a certain number of tools. In this case, there seemed to be a lot of them that went missing. At the end of the exercise, we all returned to the cantonment area and began prepping the tanks to be turned in. They had to be repaired. Basic maintenance and inspection work had to be done. They had to be cleaned and prepped and ready for inspection. All of that was taken care of. Then it came time to turn the tool sets back into the supply sergeant. And so the way it worked out, within an armor company, there are 3 platoons with 4 tanks each, plus 2 tanks within headquarters platoon, for a total of 14 tanks. Each platoon lays down their tank tarp. And so there's 3 rows of 4 plus a row of 2. They made the rows large enough for a 2.5-ton truck to ride down behind the first row, but between the first and second row. As the supply sergeant and the platoon sergeant inventoried tools within the first row, before the supply sergeant showed up, I observed certain members of the Spec 4 Mafia were cross-leveling tools, such that the first row of tank tarps had 100% of the tools. They were inspected, sub-hand receipts were exchanged and given back to the supply sergeant. But as those tools went up onto the 2.5-ton truck, I observed that they would carefully be taken off the backside of the truck discreetly, of course by a Spec 4 who was in the bed of the truck, handing them down to another Spec 4 on the other side. And systematically, those tools were cross-leveled off of the truck and down onto the tarp of the tank platoon in the next row. So platoon by platoon, it was determined that they had 100% of their tools. There was nothing missing. Nothing missing. At the end of it, the supply sergeant hopped into the truck, took off, and went to meet the company commander to return the tools. The company commander exchanged sub-hand receipts with the supply sergeant, who was his best buddy. Then they went to turn them all in. And lo and behold, they were missing something on the order of $5,000 worth of tools. And here's the problem. Ultimately, they couldn't explain how or where they lost $5,000 worth of tools. That company commander and supply sergeant went from being thick as thieves and good buddies to having a vigorous discussion about which of them was going to pay for the tools. And in the Army, as an officer, if you lose property, that is a heavy hit against your officer evaluation report. And in this case, promotion for him became an impossibility. The Army does not promote officers who lose equipment. So what's the moral of this Army story? It's this. If you're a junior officer or a non-commissioned officer, you're an up-and-coming leader, consider carefully what kind of leader you choose to be. You can choose to be a tyrant. You can choose to be an abusive idiot. and a lot of you do. But there will be a price to be paid someday, and you will never see it coming. It could very well be the lowest ranking soldiers in your unit and or the Spec 4 Mafia. I did a video about them over here, who put an end to your career. They will wait until the day you are vulnerable. Good leadership will make you effective, help you accomplish your mission, and keep you and your little career safe. Choose to be a good leader, be mission focused, and take care of your people, always. So that's it for this particular video on Army leadership. I'm glad that you stopped by. If you like this kind of content and you're not subscribed, please join the team. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell button so that you get notifications every time we upload a video. Thank you for being here, and we'll talk again soon.